Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining our panel today at SOSV's second annual Climate Tech Summit 2022. I've got with me here today John Diner. He's the CEO of Vertical Oceans, which is an urban vertical farming solution for aquaculture. He's based in Singapore. We've got Alison Kopf at UNU, which uses artificial intelligence and computer vision to help growers around the world. And she's based in Seattle. And we've got Viraj Puri, who is the CEO and co-founder of Gotham Greens, which has 10 indoor farms across the country. His first was the one that many of you may know that is on top of Whole Foods in Brooklyn, New York. So thank you so much for joining me. Viraj is based in Brooklyn and New York, and I'm so excited to be here. We're just going to jump in because you guys are all excited to see this, and we don't need to start with any preamble. So this came up in a conversation I had with Alison, and it was really interesting. And because all of you are using autonomous or computer-aided technology, I thought we could go around and first define what you believe the word autonomous means and what it means for your company. So let's start with John.
Right. So for Vertical Oceans, I mean, what autonomy means for us is that the system can make smart decisions on its own, and that it can control devices to execute those decisions without human intervention. Now, making decisions is easy when everything goes to plan. The really hard part is when unplanned or unknown events happen and making good decisions where there's no precedent information. And in biological systems, especially one like an aquatic ecosystem, which can get very complex, it's difficult to predict what would happen. And so just, developing algorithms or autonomy that can adapt their outcomes based on their own decisions and based on uncertainty is really for us what autonomous means.
Wonderful. Well, so let's go to Alison, because she was the one that inspired this question. Because as a journalist, I think of autonomous or even autonomy as like very different, had to have very different meanings. So Alison, let's hear what you have to say.
Yes, and I agree. I think there are tons of different meanings to this, and in actuality, how it actually gets implemented is also different to everybody. And I agree with John. I think we see autonomy as a closed loop system, or the product of a closed loop system, where the system can have information, it's circular, where it can make decisions and implement decisions on its own and kind of learn from that decision and then react again and again and get smarter over time. For us in practice, what this looks like a lot of times is putting the plant at the center of the decision-making process when it comes to the growing process. And so we use computer vision to see every single plant in the greenhouse and understand how it's responding to its environment. To John's point, it is a biological system. It's challenging. It's challenging to predict the unknown. It's challenging to see how plants are going to react at the end of the day, because they're going to react sometimes how they want to react if anybody's grown plants or raised animals or things like this, right? Like it is a biological system, which makes it complex. And so understanding how that plant is responding to its changing environment and using that to actually make decisions in the field, whether that's through software-driven decisions, through people-driven decisions, through mechanical-driven decisions, but closing that loop using the plant at the center is what we're working on.
It's almost like you're allowing the plant to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So Viraj, you could actually use UNU in your biggest location to date in Davis, but I know you use various off-the-shelf solutions for each farm that you build out. Define autonomous, where you may have robotics. In my mind, sometimes I think that's autonomy. Let me hear what you think.
Yeah. Firstly, I could echo exactly what John and Alison said, but to prevent being repetitive, I'll provide a slightly different perspective, even though I fully agree with what both of them said, and it's very applicable to what we do at Gotham Greens, which is, plants are not widgets, right? They are these biological, beings, and I think it's a real combination of art and science, to grow food in these highly controlled environments. So a lot of our strength is in our people, the human intervention, the human eye, the knack for growing, just understanding the health of a plant, how it's feeling. We like to play a little bit of music for our plants. No science behind whether that actually works or not, but we think it does. Keeps the people happy, certainly. So look, I think it's, I would describe it as semi-autonomous, right? So yes, we do have robotics, we do have conveyor systems, we have sophisticated sensors, algorithms, a ton of equipment, but it's farming at the end of the day, right? So it's, we really pride ourselves in having really good farmers and good, strong understanding of plant science.
So who chooses the music, Viraj?
So at different days of the week, different people. Fridays generally is reggae, reggae Friday payday. And, a little classic rock, we try to switch it up.
Awesome. That's great. I'm surprised I haven't been pitched that story yet. So you guys are doing something. Well, Viraj, you're in Davis, California now. California is, everybody knows, the agricultural basket of the country. Why did you decide to go into Davis?
Yeah, when we founded the business in Brooklyn over 10 years ago, the last place that I thought we would ever build a greenhouse farm would be in California for reasons that you stated. That's where 2/3 of the nation's fruits and vegetables are produced. It's really the center of the agricultural system. But it really occurred to us that if we're going to sort of really be part of this industry, and if greenhouse and other indoor farming systems are truly going to be a part of the agricultural supply chain, then what better place to be than in that industry and be a part of it. And partnering with the University of California in Davis has unlocked a lot of opportunities to collaborate on research development, getting the best minds, whether it's professors, students, into our field, because that's one thing that is lacking is a skilled, trained workforce in controlled environment farming systems. It's where many of the vendors are based, whether it's the input providers, seeds, fertilizer, physical equipment. It's where many of the buyers are based in food service operations and retail operations. So, and then also just given the drought in California and other sort of headwinds that the more traditional agricultural industry is facing, climate-related, labor-related, food safety, and other things, it just feels like it's an important place to be. And we've been very pleased. We've been operating a greenhouse there for about a year now.
That's great. You must have been building it during the pandemic. Were there any supply chain bottlenecks for you?
Certainly, electrical equipment, things stuck at the ports because of congestion. We faced all of it, but hopefully we're on the other side of it now.
Okay. So going into California and, looking away from sort of soil-based traditional farming, I'm curious how the community has welcomed everybody. So, John, I think you're in a sort of a newer field, right? Urban growing of shrimps. But I'd like to have everybody respond. How are traditional farmers, accepting of your new technology and what you're doing in their area?
For us, there's two kind of traditional farmers. One is the wild caught fishermen. So, people who are catching shrimps in nets in Mexico and Louisiana and places like that. And we haven't had any response from that. The other side, though, is the traditional aquaculture community. And, for the most part, there's a lot of curiosity and interest. There are a few old schoolers who don't like what we're doing because they don't understand the technology, and they might feel a little bit threatened by that. But we would view it as the bigger reaction we get, it would actually be a good thing, because it would just stimulate that industry to think more about what they're doing and the sustainability of what they're doing, and maybe try to improve their methods to reach our standards. So we hope that we would get more and more of a reaction as we expand.
There must be fishermen and fisheries in Asia that are trawling for shrimp. And have you talked to any of them?
No, we haven't. I mean, it's a lot of that farming is or a lot of that fishing is pretty remote. I wouldn't even know where to find those fishermen. But to be honest, there really isn't much wild shrimps left in Southeast Asia. So, I mean, I'm not even sure that trawlers are even trying to catch wild shrimp around here anymore, because the waters are pretty depleted and in this area particularly quite polluted. So I don't think there's much left in the ocean, unfortunately.
Interesting. Yeah. And Allison, UNU is mostly working with indoor growers, which means greenhouse. But I'd love to know, how are vertical farms interested in your technology? But then also soil based. Are you talking to them, and are they interested?
Yeah, so that's right. We work mostly with greenhouses. We do have some vertical farming projects as well, and some field. I think it's hard to sometimes ignore field when you're in the CEA space, because especially as you get into fields like ornamental production and flower production, it's so much of a combination of both field and greenhouse. And then similarly on the vertical farming side, a lot of the systems now are integrating both vertical farming and greenhouse, for example. So you have this sort of systems thinking where people are choosing the best solution for whatever they're growing, whatever time of year they're growing in, whatever location they're growing in, that sometimes it's difficult to just focus on just one of those without kind of paying attention to the others. So we've developed solutions for all of those applications. And I'll say from a reaction standpoint, there's been a really philosophical shift in mindset over the last few years. We've been around a long time, started the company about 10 years ago. And there used to be this philosophy around new technology, to John's point a little bit, maybe threatened, sure, but really just like, this is expensive, what does it do? And anybody on this call who's a founder who's out there selling, you might get that same reaction, right? And the answer should be, compared to what? And what's your current reality, right? Where are you spending money or losing money, or spending time or losing time, or spending opportunity or losing opportunity right now because you don't have this in place? What are you losing because you don't have something like this in place? And when you're a new startup, sometimes that's difficult to communicate, right? You don't have the proof points, you don't have the case studies, you don't have the information to kind of back that up. We're at a place now in our industry, and the CEA industry as a whole, whether it's vertical, greenhouse, other solutions, where it's never been a better time for technology like this. The labor shortage that Viraj talked about is very real. There's a grower shortage. There's a skilled and unskilled laborers challenge, right, in agriculture as a whole. We've got rapidly rising square footage. People like Gotham Greens and everybody else in this space are growing like crazy, right, because the demand is there. And so we're growing at a fast pace without labor to keep up with us. And we're spending, and we're already in that place where we were losing opportunity because we don't have these systems. So I would say, philosophically, we've seen a huge shift in the mindset of before kind of going, this is expensive for what? Or maybe that threatened feeling to, yeah, we need to embrace this. We don't see a future without these types of technologies, whether we're going to try building it, whether we're going to try buying it, whether we're going to try partnering in different ways. We need to have these types of solutions.
So tell me, what are they most concerned about? Is it like help us grow our yield, or help us with the labor shortage?
Yeah, it really depends on the types of crop segments you're talking to, but those two pieces are the core pieces, right? And so when we speak to large leafy greens producers, we work with about 90% of the greenhouse growers in North America. And for them, almost always it's about consistency of yield and quality of crops, right? It's just produce really high yielding, high quality crop consistently throughout the year. If you talk to ornamental growers, it's a little bit different. That labor shortage is so core because the margins aren't as high. And so every time that they experience a labor challenge, that is felt really dramatically to the business. Not to say that leafy greens don't experience the same challenges, but the way that it's felt on the margin is just slightly different because it's a slightly different margin crop. And a lot of these growers are trying to grow 5 acres, 10 acres, 50 acres a year, but without necessarily adding to the talent pool because it's not growing as fast as the square footage can. How do you match that gap?
Yeah. So Viraj, you went into California. I've already said this. I'm like, can't stop making the point because it's kind of like on the one hand crazy, but on the other hand, you told me you're selling out of your greens every day. So the demand is clearly there. How are farmers reacting? I know there are farmers around Davis. I mean, most are in Central California, but there are many farmers around where you are, which is a little north. How have they reacted to Gotham greens coming in?
Well, I'd certainly love to be a fly on the wall in some of those closed door meetings. But look, to us at least, at face value, the reception has been relatively warm. We've hosted a lot of local farmers for tours of our greenhouse so they can see what we're doing. We've partnered with the university in a few different ways, UC Davis, that is. Look, a lot of farmers are feeling the strain of water shortages, right? I mean, they're having to dig their wells deeper and deeper. The quality of the water is not as good as it once was. They're facing a lot of labor-related issues as well. So I think, many of the farmers feel like more technology and technological evolution is important. They're sort of facing, some of them, not all of them, I don't want to be dramatic, but some of them are facing sort of significant headwinds, at best, and sort of existential crisis of their multi-generational craft at worst, right? So I think a lot of them feel like it's important to integrate new technologies into the food supply chain, particularly ones that can be efficient with natural resources like water. Look, the Central Valley of California is still doing pretty well as far as water is concerned, but in the autumn and the winter, most of the leafy greens are produced in Yuma, Arizona. Now, that's a different story. And just with the whole Colorado River and the rationing of the water that's being proposed now, it could potentially wipe out Yuma as being a major producer of leafy greens. So the production will have to move elsewhere, or we believe more into greenhouses.
Yeah, I've been listening to the drought and the Colorado River, especially right now. So great that you bring that up, Viraj, and everybody. I'm going to go through everybody. Viraj and John, what are the downsides to your system? As a journalist, I often hear about just what's good, right? Less water, no pesticides, targeted fertilizer, better yield, faster growing. But there must be downsides. What's a downside of your system, Viraj?
Incredibly capitally intensive, incredibly challenging to design, engineer, build, and then we've talked about it a little bit, but these are hard facilities to run. I think there might be a misnomer that because it's got a lot of technology, you push a couple buttons and beautiful shrimp or beautiful heads of lettuce or flowers just kind of come out on the other end like an assembly line, right? Like a Willy Wonka factory. And the reality is that they're very challenging to operate. There's almost less a margin for error in these high-tech greenhouses. So let's not sugarcoat it. There's a lot of promise. There's a lot of benefits to these types of systems, but they're expensive to build and operate and complex.
And are there any downsides environmentally?
Look, energy is a big one, depending on the format. That's certainly a big part of our production systems. That's in one part why we're fairly agnostic with our technology selection, but we've decided to use greenhouses primarily due to the lower energy costs. I like to say, let's not let perfect sort of get in the way of good. I think there's a lot of great benefits to these systems. It's not perfect. But I think just overall, the land savings, the water savings, using fewer chemicals, and then eliminating the transportation costs and the associated emissions by virtue of locating these facilities closer to large population centers, I think are all net positives.
Gotcha. And John, your system's a little newer. I know you're working on you're working on scaling, but what do you see as downsides to what you're developing environmentally? Yeah,
I agree with what Viraj said about the capital cost and also the complexity of operating one of our facilities. It's we have a number of different technology domains that need to come together and work seamlessly. There's bioengineering, there's hardware engineering, there's computational engineering, and all that needs to work seamlessly and is very complicated to do that and to do that consistently. And consistency is really fundamental. But creating consistency in a biological system is difficult. And it's not like you've got a machine and then it chunks out shrimps every few minutes. That's not the way that it works. So there is all of that complexity. For us, the one comparison that we get all of the time, which it confuses me a little bit why this question comes up, but our cost of production costs more than what it would cost to produce in an open farm in Southeast Asia or Latin America. But a big portion of that additional cost is the fact that we're 100% recirculating. We don't discharge any effluent. We upcycle all of the waste in our system, and there's a cost associated with doing that. So in my mind, when people say, well, you need to get your cost to be the same as those farms, it's a bit hard for me to reconcile that idea, because those farms are just pushing the cost of their unsustainable methods or their pollution onto Mother Nature, whereas we fix that. But our cost of production is about 30 to 40% higher than what it would be in an open pond system, and probably similar to catching it in the wild. So that's one issue. The other issue that bothers us a little bit is that we still use plastic packaging, and that really goes against our values, and it really bothers me to do that. We're working with a packaging supplier to find a more sustainable way to do it, but that's also another element of our system which we just haven't yet found a reliable food safe alternative that is fully biodegradable. But we will get there. But that's a big pain point for me. I really feel uncomfortable about that aspect of it.
Yeah, I know. And I know Viraj is, working on that with Gotham Greens. I mean, how many plastic tubs of, pretty beautiful leafy greens do we see at the supermarket? And I know it's a problem, and it's something that more people will start to, it'll be a reason not to buy the product because it's in a plastic tub. That's the direction I think we're going. I know that the younger generations are really thinking about sustainability. So that's Gen X, that's Gen Alpha. Gen Alpha is not really shopping at the supermarket yet, but they will be. So I'm curious, Allison and Viraj, and we'll start with Allison. You two have so much experience and knowledge about really valuable areas of indoor growing and technology. What advice would you give to John? And keep it real quick. What advice would you give to John as he's scaling his shrimps systems in Singapore?
That's a good question. I think the most important thing, honestly, for any entrepreneur when you're building your business is just really understanding your customer so deeply. Be there, right? As a founder, understand that customer. And that customer, even if they're changing, right? Just understand what they're looking for, what they're struggling with, what they're trying to buy, and match that demand, right? And then start steering them where they want to go or where they can go, but being there, right? I think a lot of founders try to pass off that responsibility too early, probably, and start just kind of steering them from afar. But being really in tune with your customer would be the thing, and delivering value, right? At the end of the day, that's what we're here to do is we can't change the world if we're not delivering value to the people that we're trying to work with.
Awesome. And Viraj, quick, what's the advice?
Find folks with complementary skill sets, to your own, right? And so just you can spread it out. I have two great partners in my business, one who's very financially minded and he helps with that aspect of things. And then obviously our head grower who's really a plant scientist. So I think that's super important. And also, Allison, I know knows this as well. Just don't give up, right? I mean, you're just a lot of grit, a lot of determination. And if you have a lot of conviction in what you're doing, success will come.
That's such great advice, I think, for everybody watching this. Okay, lightning round. What are you working on in the year to come? Viraj.
Oh man, just building more greenhouses around the country and just trying to really focus on bottom line now. We're in this economic environment where the investment community is not just going to reward top line growth, but also bottom line. So really honing in on our operations and being a world-class producer. Yeah.
Allison?
Yeah, we're working on two things right now. We're launching for tomato producers, which is a huge challenge, new product, new everything, new market. So launching for tomato producers in Q1. And then towards the end of the year, something that we're working on is really focused on that autonomous growing component and pushing more in that direction when it comes to physically controlling your environment.
Amazing. John.
Yeah, for us, we're working on the engineering of our first commercial scale facility, which we'll build in the U.S. Starting in April of next year. And so just seeing all of the technologies finally come together, 2 years ago was literally a design on a sheet of paper, and now to actually see all those components come together is just kind of a beautiful thing to see that idea actually kind of come to fruition. So.
I'm super excited to hear that because you mostly sell your shrimps direct to consumer, and I will be ordering when your website goes up for the US. Thank you so much, Viraj, Allison, John, for joining me today at the SOSV Climate Tech 2022. This was so great. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you, Larissa.
Thank you.
Thanks, Larissa.